She attended his wedding, but he froze when he saw her son, his secret son. He left his bride and... Hi, my most treasured, most adored and divinely loved family. How are you today, my heart? This is your Mr. Peter, and I speak to you not just as a creator, but as a man whose soul is bound to yours in love. You are my light, my strength, my forever blessing. My beautiful queens, noble kings, beloved sons and daughters. You are God's gift to me, and I honor you with every breath I take. Your presence is a miracle in my life, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for walking this journey with me. A prayer wrapped in purest love. May heaven smile on you in ways you never imagined. May your heart know deep, gentle peace, and your life overflow with joy that never ends. I pray every tear you've cried waters a garden of blessings. May you feel love in every corner of your life, and may kindness follow you wherever you go. I ask God to cover you with grace, protect your spirit, and bless everything your hands touch. You are not just loved, you are sacred, chosen, and eternally embraced. My beloved family, thank you for your endless love and faith in me. Can we reach 1,000 likes on this video together? And today, I ask one more thing from your beautiful heart. Promise me you'll bring at least one friend to witness this story. Just one soul to feel what we feel, to join this family of love, healing, and connection. Please like, comment, share, and bring someone you care about. Because together, we are not just strong, we are unstoppable. Now let's begin. With love overflowing and hearts forever united, my beautiful, precious family. The cathedral bells of St. Patrick's rang through Manhattan's crisp autumn air, their bronze voices echoing off glass towers as Pat Wilkinson adjusted his platinum cufflinks one final time. 500 guests filled the pews below, their expectant faces turned toward the altar where he stood in his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. Everything was perfect. The white orchids imported from Thailand at tremendous expense. The string quartet, playing Pachelbel's canon with professional precision. The society photographers capturing every moment for tomorrow's Times wedding section. This was the life his family had meticulously orchestrated. The right bride from the right family, the right venue steeped in tradition, the right future stretching ahead like a carefully mapped road to prosperity and respectability. Last chance to run, his best man James whispered beside him, adjusting his own boutonniere with nervous fingers. They'd known each other since prep school, through college and into adulthood, and James knew him better than most. Pat forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Why would I run? This is everything I've worked toward. But even as the words left his mouth, a hollowness echoed in his chest that he couldn't quite name. He pushed the feeling down, burying it beneath years of conditioning, focusing on the massive oak doors at the cathedral's far end. In moments, Serena would appear, beautiful, suitable, everything his mother had deemed appropriate for a Wilkinson heir to marry. The music swelled dramatically. The congregation rose as one. The towering doors opened with theatrical precision, revealing the moment everyone had gathered to witness. Serena Blackwell stood framed in golden afternoon light, resplendent in her Vera Wang creation that had been featured in Vogue's bridal issue. 20 feet of handmade French lace trailed behind her like fresh snow, held by 2 flower girls in pink tulle who scattered rose petals with practiced precision. Her father, Senator Harrison Blackwell, offered his arm with the polished dignity of a man accustomed to public ceremonies and political theater. Pat straightened his shoulders, preparing to receive his bride as his father had received his mother, 32 years ago in this same cathedral. But as Serena began her measured procession down the aisle, movement in the back row caught his eye. A latecomer sliding into the shadows of the last pew. Nothing unusual for a society wedding where fashionably late arrivals were often calculated power plays. But something made Pat look harder, perhaps the way the afternoon light caught her hair or the familiar tilt of her head as she settled into the pew. His breath stopped completely. Lynn McLean. She stood partially hidden behind a marble column, wearing a simple white dress that made his chest constrict with sudden, overwhelming memory. Her hair fell in dark waves past her shoulders, longer than he remembered, but unmistakably her. 8 years had vanished in an instant. His pulse jumped erratically. His carefully manicured hands began to tremble. Beside her stood a small boy, perhaps 7 years old, dressed in what looked like a school uniform. Pat's gaze dropped to the child, and the world tilted violently off its axis. The boy had his grandmother's eyes, Pat's own distinctive green eyes, staring back from a face that could have been pulled directly from Pat's childhood photo albums. The same wavy dark hair that Pat spent fortunes trying to tame each morning. The same strong jawline that ran through generations of Wilkinson men. The dimpled chin that had marked every male in his family line. Even the way the boy tilted his head, studying the cathedral stained glass windows with quiet curiosity. It was like watching his younger self in perfect miniature. Pat? Serena's voice seemed to come from underwater, distorted and distant. She'd reached the altar while he'd been frozen in revelation, her father placing her manicured hand in Pat's. But Pat's fingers had gone numb, nerveless, unable to close around. Hers, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the child who was so obviously, undeniably his son. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his sonorous voice filling the cathedral with practiced authority. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Patrick Edward Wilkinson and Serena Grace Blackwell in holy matrimony." The words washed over Pat without meaning. His ears rang with white noise, his vision tunneling to that back pew where Lynn shifted uncomfortably, clearly preparing to leave. The boy tugged at her dress, pointing at the rose window above the altar, his young voice carrying in the cathedral's perfect acoustics. "Mama, look at all the colors. They're like rainbows." The word hit Pat like a physical blow. Mama. This child, his child, calling Lynn Mama. "Patrick!" His mother's sharp whisper cut through his trance like a blade. Eleanor Wilkinson sat in the front pew, resplendent in vintage Chanel, her perfectly styled silver hair gleaming under crystal chandeliers. Her eyes held warning and something else. Recognition. Fear? The same look she'd given him 8 years ago when she'd announced Lynn's disappearance from his life. "Focus, darling. Everyone's watching." The memory crashed over him with sudden, brutal clarity. His mother arriving at his apartment that grey morning, her face a mask of false sympathy. "She's gone, Patrick. That girl has left New York, left you. I know this is difficult, but women of her sort often realize they're out of their depth in our world. You're better off without such complications." He'd searched for months afterward, hired the best investigators money could buy, but Lynn had vanished without a trace. Eventually, wounded pride and his mother's constant reminders had done their work. He'd convinced himself she'd used him, that their love hadn't been real, that she'd taken the money his mother claimed to have offered and disappeared to build a better life elsewhere. But she hadn't just left. She'd left carrying his child. "The rings, please," the priest intoned, gesturing to the small satin pillow. Pat watched in slow motion as Serena's nephew stepped forward with the velvet cushion bearing 2 platinum bands that had cost more than most people's cars. His hands moved automatically, taking Serena's ring, the metal cold and foreign against his palm. But his eyes found Lynn again. She was backing toward the door now, the boy's hand clutched tightly in hers, her face a portrait of barely controlled panic. Their eyes met across the cathedral's vast space. Time stopped completely. In that suspended moment, Pat saw everything. The pain etched in her features, the fear she couldn't quite hide, the desperate love that still flickered beneath years of hurt. He saw late nights in her tiny apartment, their bodies curved together. As rain tapped against windows, He saw her dancing in his kitchen wearing nothing but his Columbia t-shirt, singing off-key to the radio while scrambling eggs. He saw their last night together, her tears soaking his chest as she whispered, "I love you," over and over like a prayer. "Patrick, the ring," Serena prompted, her perfectly modulated voice carrying an edge of embarrassment at the delay. The boy, in the back pew, dropped his toy car. The small crash echoed through the cathedral with shocking clarity as metal hit marble. Several guests turned to look at the disturbance. The child's sweet voice carried clearly in the hushed space. "Sorry, Mama, it slipped." That voice. God. Even the voice carried his own childhood cadence. The same tone, the same inflection Pat heard in old home videos. "I can't." The words left Pat's mouth before he realized he'd spoken them aloud. The ring slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, rolling across the altar steps with a metallic chime that seemed to go on forever. "Pat!" Serena's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together in confusion. "What are you doing?" But Pat was already moving, his legs carrying him down the aisle without conscious thought. The cathedral erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. Pews creaked as guests turned to watch the groom abandon his bride. Someone, his mother, called his name in outrage. Cameras flashed frantically as society photographers scrambled to capture the unfolding scandal. He ran faster, his morning shoes slipping on the polished marble. Lynn's eyes widened with pure panic. She scooped up their son, their son, and turned to flee. Pat's dress shoes skidded treacherously on the cathedral's polished floor, his morning coat restricting his movement as he chased the ghosts of his past. "Lynn! Wait!" She burst through the cathedral's massive doors into the grey October afternoon. Rain had begun while they were inside, fat drops that spoke of an incoming deluge. Pat followed, yanking off his constraining morning coat and letting it fall forgotten on the cathedral steps. Thunder rumbled overhead, the sky darkening as if in sympathy with the drama below. "Lynn, please!" She reached a black sedan, parked at the curb, fumbling desperately with the door handle while struggling to hold the frightened boy. Pat caught her arm just as she wrenched the door open. "Let go!" She pulled away from him, her eyes wild with an emotion he couldn't name. Fear, anger, heartbreak. The rain had already soaked through her thin white dress, making it cling to curves that were fuller now, changed by motherhood, but still achingly familiar. "That's my son." The words came out raw, desperate, torn from the deepest part of his soul. "I don't know you." She clutched the boy tighter, backing against the car as rain streamed down her face. "We've never met. Leave us alone." But her voice broke on the last word, the lie transparent in her tear-filled eyes. The boy, his son, buried his face in Lynn's neck, small arms wrapped around her as she trembled in the downpour. "Mama, who is that man?" The child's voice was muffled against her shoulder, but clear enough to break Pat's heart. "Why is he chasing us?" "No one, baby. Just someone confused." Lynn's voice caught on a sob she tried desperately to swallow. She bundled the boy into the car with shaking hands, slamming the door before Pat could speak again. Through the rain-streaked window, he caught one last glimpse of his son's face. Those green eyes wide with fear and confusion, tear tracks on cheeks that held Pat's own dimples. The sedan pulled away with squealing tires, water spraying from puddles, leaving Pat standing alone on the cathedral steps. Rain soaked through his expensive tuxedo, plastering his carefully styled hair to his forehead, mixing with tears he didn't try to hide. Behind him, 500 wedding guests waited in shocked silence. His abandoned bride stood at the altar, her fairy tale day transformed into a nightmare. His mother would be incandescent with rage, already planning damage control. The tabloids would feast on this scandal for months. Wilkinson heir abandons bride at altar. But none of it mattered. Pat, sank onto the wet stone steps, pressing his palms against his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw that little boy's face, his son's face, over and over again. "My son," he whispered to the empty street, rain washing the words away. "I have a son." 8 years. 8 years of his child's life stolen, erased, denied. 8 years of first words and first steps, of bedtime stories and birthday candles, of scraped knees and proud moments. 8 years of Lynn struggling alone while he'd been convinced she'd betrayed him, abandoned him for money. The rain fell harder, turning from drops to sheets, washing away the last pretenses of the life he'd built on lies. Pat stood slowly, water streaming down his face, and made a vow to the storm-dark sky. He would find them. He would learn the truth that had been hidden for 8 years. And this time, nothing, not his mother's machinations, not society's expectations, not hell itself, would keep him from his family. The cathedral bells rang again behind him, this time in discord, mourning the death of one future while another, more uncertain one, began. Pat walked away from the cathedral, from his old life, from everything he'd thought he wanted. With each step through the driving rain, his determination grew stronger. He had a son, and he was going to find him. Chapter 2. Passion's Ghost. Pat slumped in his leather armchair, still wearing his rain-soaked tuxedo shirt and pants, the fabric clinging uncomfortably to his skin. The Manhattan penthouse felt cavernous in the darkness, shadows dancing across Italian marble floors as city lights filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows. A bottle of Macallan sat half-empty on the glass coffee table beside his abandoned phone, 87 missed calls and counting, the screen lighting up relentlessly with names he couldn't face. He'd silenced it after his mother's 20th attempt, each ring feeling like an accusation of the life he'd just destroyed. The whiskey burned its familiar path down his throat, but not enough to erase the image seared permanently into his mind. His own green eyes staring back from a 7-year-old's innocent face. His son. He had a son with Lynn. Pat closed his eyes and finally allowed himself to remember what he'd spent 8 years desperately trying to bury beneath suitable relationships and family expectations. The memories came flooding back like a dam bursting, each one more vivid than the last. The thunderstorm had been fierce that September day at Columbia, the kind that turned the sky purple-black and sent students scurrying for shelter. He'd been in Butler Library, ostensibly studying for his economics midterm, but actually hiding from his mother's latest matchmaking attempt. Dinner with the Vanderbilt heiress who collected art and spoke in monotone about her trust fund. Rain pounded against the Gothic windows with increasing violence when she entered. Lynn McLean arrived like a force of nature, soaking wet, laughing at her predicament, her arms overflowing with art supplies that seemed determined to escape her grasp. She wore a yellow sundress that the rain had turned translucent, the thin fabric clinging to curves that made his mouth go dry and his concentration scatter completely. "Shit, shit, shit," she'd muttered, canvases scattering across the polished marble floor as she tried to juggle portfolios, paint boxes, and a broken umbrella. Without thinking, Pat had jumped up from his secluded study corner to help. Their hands touched, reaching for the same painting, a wild abstract full of reds and golds that seemed to pulse with life, even while wet with rain. "Careful," she'd said, not looking up from her rescue efforts. "It's still wet. The paint, I mean." "It's beautiful." He'd meant the painting initially, but found himself staring at her face instead. High cheekbones that caught the library's warm lighting, full lips curved in concentration, skin like burnished bronze, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim reading room. She'd looked up then, catching him staring with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "You're looking at me, not the painting." I know. The honesty had surprised them both. Most women he knew would have blushed, looked away, played coy, the practiced dance of his social circle. Lynn had simply studied him with those remarkable eyes, taking his measure. Do you always stare at women in libraries? Only the beautiful ones who assault me with wet paintings. Her laugh had been throaty, genuine, nothing like the practiced titters of the debutantes his mother favored. I'm Lynn, and you're getting paint on your hands. He'd looked down to find red and gold streaking his palms where he'd handled her canvases. Pat, and now I'll have to see you again to return your artwork. That's the worst pickup line I've ever heard. Did it work? She'd tilted her head, considering him with an artist's eye. Buy me coffee and find out. Coffee had turned into 5 hours of conversation in a tiny cafe while the storm raged outside, rain streaming down windows as they talked. She was everything his world wasn't, a scholarship student from Brooklyn, daughter of a single mother who cleaned houses in neighborhoods like his. She danced ballet to pay for art supplies, painted portraits for tourists in Central Park, wrote poetry that made his chest ache with emotions he couldn't name. She spoke about art and life with a passion that made everyone else he knew seem colorless by comparison. "What about you?" she'd asked, chin propped on paint-stained hands. "Who's Patrick Wilkinson when he's not rescuing clumsy artists?" He'd found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone, how he'd wanted to be a pianist before his father crushed that dream with talk of practical pursuits, how suffocated he felt by family expectations and predetermined futures, how sometimes he stood at his penthouse windows and wondered what it would feel like to jump, to fly, to be free of the weight of his last name. "You're not what I expected," she'd said finally, after he'd confessed his dreams of escaping to Paris to study music. "What did you expect? Rich boy, privileged, shallow." She'd smiled to soften the words. "Instead, you're sad and sweet and a little lost. And you're not what I expected either." "What did you expect?" "I didn't expect anything. I didn't expect you." Their first kiss had happened 2 weeks later, caught in another rainstorm because storms seemed to follow them like a blessing. They ducked under a bookstore awning, both soaked to the skin, laughing at their terrible luck with weather. Her white t-shirt had become transparent, revealing a black lace bra that made his hands itch to touch. Water dripped from her hair onto her shoulders, creating paths he wanted to trace with his tongue. "You're staring again," she'd said, but her voice was breathless, aware. "I can't help it." "Pat." She'd stepped back against the bookstore window, creating distance. "This is complicated. Your world, my world, they don't mix. Oil and water." "I don't care about worlds." He'd moved closer, drawn by something stronger than social boundaries. She'd reached up then, fingers tracing his jaw. "With artist's precision, your family will care, your mother." "Will never know. This is just us, Lynn. Just you and me." The kiss was soft at first, tentative, testing boundaries. Then she'd made a small sound in her throat, and something ignited between them. She'd tasted like rain and rebellion, like everything he'd been denied. Her body had melted against his, soft curves pressed against him as thunder rolled overhead. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads touching. "This is dangerous," she'd whispered against his lips. "The best things usually are." Their secret affair had been intoxicating. Stolen moments between classes became entire afternoons, vanishing into each other. Late nights in her studio apartment in Morningside Heights, a fifth-floor walk-up that smelled of oil paint and jasmine from the plant she kept on the fire escape. She'd paint him naked sometimes, her hands leaving colorful fingerprints on his skin as she positioned him in the afternoon light. He'd never felt more alive than in those moments. watching her work with fierce concentration, making love against paint-splattered walls, waking tangled in her sheets with morning light streaming through grimy windows. She danced for him sometimes, moving to music only she could hear, wearing nothing but one of his abandoned Oxford shirts. The memory of her like that, hair wild, eyes closed, lost in movement, still haunted him 8 years later. He'd play piano on the battered upright she'd rescued from a curb, composing pieces that tried to capture what she made him feel, though music seemed inadequate for the emotions she stirred. But it was their connection beyond the physical that had truly undone him. Lynn saw through every facade, every carefully constructed defense. With her, he wasn't the Wilkinson heir or the dutiful son or the future CEO. He was just Pat, who loved thunderstorms and Chopin nocturnes, who read poetry in secret, who dreamed of a life beyond boardrooms and society galas. "Run away with me," he'd whispered one night, her naked body curved against his in her narrow bed. Rain tapped against the windows, always rain with them, as if the universe knew they were meant for storms. Where would we go? Her fingers traced lazy patterns on his chest. Anywhere. Paris, Bali, that artist colony in New Mexico you mentioned. Anywhere but here. She'd been quiet for long moments. And live on what? Love, poetry, pretty words? I have money, your family's money, which they'd cut off the second you left with someone like me. I don't care about money. You say that now. Her voice had been sad, knowing. But when reality hits, when you're washing dishes to pay rent, when you can't afford the life you're used to, you underestimate me. No, I see you clearly. That's the problem. They'd fought about it, their first real fight. Pat had stormed out, pride wounded, but had returned hours later with rain in his hair and desperation in his eyes. And a ring, not the 4-carat diamond his mother had already selected for his eventual society bride. A simple band with a tiny sapphire, purchased from an antique shop in the village, with cash he'd saved from his own internship earnings. "Marry me," he'd said, dropping to one knee on her paint-splattered studio floor. "Pat, in secret, just us. We'll figure out the rest later, but I need to know you're mine, that this is real." Her eyes had filled with tears, and for a moment he'd thought she'd refuse. Then she'd laughed, the sound caught between joy and despair. "You beautiful, impossible man, you know this is insane. Is that a yes?" "Yes, God help us both, yes." They'd married that weekend in a tiny ceremony on a hidden beach in Montauk. Just them, the officiant, and 2 surfers they'd recruited as witnesses. Lynn had worn a white sundress with flowers in her hair, barefoot in the sand. Pat had never seen anything more beautiful than her face as she said, "I do," the setting sun painting everything gold, the sound of waves their wedding march. That night, they'd made love on the beach under a blanket of stars, salt on their skin, sand in their hair. She'd traced "I love you" on his chest with her fingertips, and he'd known with perfect certainty that he'd finally found where he belonged. "Promise me something," she'd whispered as dawn broke over the ocean. "Anything. If it gets too hard, if your family makes things impossible, don't hate me for leaving." "Lynn, promise me, Pat. Promise you won't hate me." "I promise, but you're not going anywhere. We're married now. Forever, remember?" "Forever," she'd echoed, but something in her eyes had been sad, as if she could see a future he couldn't. 3 months later, she was gone. Pat poured another whiskey, the memories cutting deeper than any blade. He'd returned from a business trip his father had insisted on to find their secret apartment empty. Her things vanished. No note, no explanation. Just empty hangers in the closet and the lingering scent of her perfume. His mother had delivered the news with cool efficiency. Lynn had been seen at the bank clearing out the small account Pat had set up for her, had been spotted purchasing a one-way ticket out of New York. "She played you, darling," Eleanor had said, patting his hand with manicured fingers. "I know it hurts, but women of her background often see men like you as meal tickets. Be grateful." She showed her true colors before things went further. He'd searched desperately, hired the best private investigators money could buy, called everyone she'd ever mentioned, visited every place they'd been together. But Lynn McLean had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. Even their marriage certificate had disappeared from the courthouse records, leaving him to wonder if he'd imagined it all. Eventually, wounded pride and his mother's constant reminders had done their work. He'd convinced himself she'd used him, that their love hadn't been real, that she'd taken his money and run the moment a better opportunity arose. He'd buried the pain under work, under suitable girlfriends who bored him, under the life everyone expected him to live. But now he knew the truth. Lynn hadn't left because she didn't love him. She'd left because she was pregnant. She'd faced whatever had driven her away alone, had raised their son alone, had carried the weight of their secret alone. His phone buzzed again, a text from his mother. "We need to discuss your appalling behavior. Breakfast tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp." Pat deleted it without responding. His old life, his old obligations, felt like clothes that no longer fit. He had bigger truths to uncover, deeper wounds to heal. Somewhere in this city, Lynn was putting their son to bed, his son. A boy who had his eyes, his smile, who called her Mama in a voice that echoed with Pat's own childhood tones. Tomorrow he would begin searching. Tonight he let himself grieve. For the years lost, for the lies believed, for the family he'd never known he had. The ghosts of their passion haunted him, but now they led somewhere new. Not to the past, but to a future he was determined to claim. His son, his wife, for they'd never officially divorced. His real life. The storm outside was passing, but Pat's true tempest had just begun. Chapter 3. Dangerous Games. 3 days of relentless searching finally yielded results. The private investigator Pat hired, discreet, expensive, and thorough, with connections throughout the city, had tracked Lynn to a dance studio in Brooklyn. The Martha Graham Dance Academy occupied a converted warehouse's 3rd floor in Williamsburg, its tall industrial windows overlooking the East River, where barges drifted like steel dreams. Pat sat in his black Mercedes across the street, heart hammering against his ribs as he observed students entering and leaving through the building's graffiti-decorated entrance. He'd been parked here since 3 o'clock, watching dancers with their gym bags slung over shoulders, their postures straight and graceful even in street clothes, waiting, watching, gathering courage for a confrontation 8 years in the making. The autumn sun slanted lower, painting the brick facades in warm honey tones when he finally saw her. Lynn emerged wearing black leggings that hugged her dancers' legs and an oversized grey sweater that slipped off one shoulder, revealing the delicate curve where he used to press kisses. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, wisps escaping to frame her face in the late afternoon light. She laughed at something another instructor said, the sound carrying across the street and piercing straight through his chest like an arrow finding its mark. Even from this distance she moved with fluid grace, every gesture deliberate and beautiful, her body speaking the language of movement he'd fallen in love with. She was more stunning than memory had allowed, maturity adding depth and confidence to her beauty. Pat waited until she returned inside, until the last afternoon class ended and other instructors departed in chattering groups. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, when he finally found the courage to cross the street. The industrial elevator creaked and groaned its ascent, each floor marking another year of separation, another layer of hurt and confusion. His reflection in the tarnished metal doors showed a man transformed from the abandoned groom. Gone was the perfect hair sculpted by stylists, the designer suit tailored to perfection. He wore simple jeans and a black cashmere sweater, approaching not as Patrick Wilkinson of Manhattan's elite, but simply as Pat, the man who'd loved her. The elevator opened onto a small lobby adorned with dance posters, Martha Graham herself. In dramatic poses, advertisements for upcoming performances, class schedules typed in cheerful fonts. Through Studio A's glass doors, he could see her. Lynn danced alone before mirror-covered walls, completely lost in movement. Classical music with electronic undertones flowed through the space, something modern and haunting that matched her movements. She wore the same outfit from earlier, now damp with exertion, the fabric clinging to her form as she executed a series of turns that defied gravity and physics. Pat pushed open the door silently, mesmerized by her artistry. Her style had evolved, still the raw emotion he remembered, but refined now with technical precision and professional polish. She danced like someone exorcising demons, each movement a conversation with ghosts, every gesture laden with stories, untold. When she finally stopped, chest heaving from exertion, their eyes met in the mirror. Her transformation was instant and complete, body rigid, defensive, like a wild animal sensing danger. Her water bottle dropped from nerveless fingers, rolling away forgotten across the polished floor. In the mirror's reflection, he saw her face cycle through emotions. Shock, fear, something that might have been longing before it vanished behind defensive walls. "You need to leave." Her voice was steady, controlled, but he caught the slight tremor, saw her hands shake as she grabbed a towel from the bar. "Now!" "This is private property. I'll call the police." She spun to face him, maintaining distance like a careful dance, each step calculated. The setting sun through the windows created a halo effect around her, golden light catching in the wisps of hair that had escaped her bun. "I just want to talk. We have nothing to discuss. I don't know you." The lie was transparent, desperate. Her eyes darted to the door, calculating escape routes like a trapped creature. "Don't," Pat said. "Harder than intended. Don't pretend. Not when I can see the truth in your eyes." She backed away as he stepped closer, their movement a tense choreography around the empty studio, him advancing, her retreating in measured steps. 8 years, Lynn. 8 years of lies, of wondering, of thinking you... Emotion choked the words he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "I don't know what you're talking about." But her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. "A stranger who knows about the scar on your hip from falling off your bike at 10. Who knows you can't sleep without the window cracked open. Who knows you cry during Moonlight Sonata because it reminds you of your grandmother." Her breath hitched audibly. "Stop." "Who knows about the birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your inner thigh? Who knows exactly how you sound when—" "Stop!" The word echoed off mirrors, raw with pain and memory. Pat moved closer, near, enough now to smell her light perfume, different from years ago, something with jasmine and sandalwood, but underneath, essentially her. "That little boy at the church, he's mine." Pure terror flashed across her features before she could hide it, her mask slipping completely. "I don't have a son." "Lynn, please, I saw him. He has my eyes, my smile, the way I tilt my head when I'm thinking." "Get out." Her voice was deadly quiet now, the calm before a storm. "Get out before I call security." The studio door burst open with a bang. A boy ran in. Their son, backpack bouncing against his small shoulders, face flushed with excitement and pride. He wore a private school uniform, navy blazer with a gold crest and grey pants, looking like Pat's childhood photos brought to startling life. Mama, guess what? I got the solo in the Christmas concert. Mrs. Patterson says I play like a professional already, and she wants me to do the Bach piece we've been practicing, and Tommy Jenkins was so jealous, but I told him—" He stopped mid-sentence, green eyes widening as he recognized Pat. "You're the man from the church, the one who chased us in the rain." Lynn moved swiftly, fluid as water, placing herself between them like a shield. "Jordan, go to my office, now." "But Mama—" "Now, baby, please." Panic edged her voice, maternal. Fear, overriding everything else. "Are you okay? Is he bothering you?" The protective instinct in the child's voice, his son's voice, made Pat's throat constrict painfully. At 7, the boy was ready to defend his mother against a perceived threat. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just go do your homework. I'll be right there." Jordan hesitated, studying Pat with those penetrating green eyes that missed nothing, that saw too much. "Why does he look sad, Mama?" The innocent question hung in the air like a held breath. Lynn's composure cracked slightly, a fissure in her. Defensive walls. "Jordan, please, my office, now." The boy shouldered his backpack reluctantly and walked toward a door marked private, but kept casting curious glances back over his shoulder. When the door finally closed, Lynn whirled on Pat, maternal fury replacing fear. "How dare you come here? How dare you intrude on—" "He plays piano." Pat's voice was soft with wonder. "Like me." "Leave us alone." The words were fierce but desperate. A mother's plea. 8 years, Lynn. 8 years you've kept my son from me. 8 years of his life stolen. He's not— But the lie died unspoken, impossible to maintain. "Then who's his father?" Pat pressed, stepping closer, using his height advantage. "Where is he? What's his name?" Lynn's chin lifted defiantly, a gesture he remembered. "He died before Jordan was born. A soldier, a hero." "What was his name?" "That's none of—" "What? Unit? Where was he stationed? What was his rank? Where's he buried?" The questions came rapid fire, each one a challenge. She was trapped now between his body and the bar, that familiar electricity crackling between them despite everything. Her pulse raced visibly at her throat, pupils dilated in the dimming. And light. Still, after all these years, their bodies recognized each other, responded to proximity. "Your body remembers me," Pat whispered, voicing the thought. He raised a hand, not quite touching her face, close enough to feel the heat of her skin. "Even if you want to forget." "Don't." But the protest was weak, breathless. "Why did you leave? What scared you so badly you ran?" "I would have protected. You, both of you. I searched for months. You can't protect us from your own family." The words burst out before she could stop them, truth finally breaking through. "What does that mean?" "My mother. What did she do?" Lynn's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She ducked under his arm with dancer's agility, putting distance between them again. "Mama!" Jordan's voice called from the office. "Are you coming? I can't find my math homework." The interruption shattered the moment completely. When Lynn spoke again, her voice was ice, all warmth gone. "I'm calling my lawyer. If you come near us again, I'll file a restraining order. I have witnesses who'll testify you've been stalking us, security footage of you sitting outside for hours. Stay away from my son." "Our son." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "Prove it." The challenge hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. Pat could demand a paternity test, force the issue through courts. But something in her eyes, that terror she couldn't quite hide, made him pause. "What are you so afraid of?" For a moment her mask dropped completely. He saw the girl he'd married, vulnerable, frightened, yet fierce as a lioness protecting her cub. "You have no idea what you're risking for all of us." "Then tell me." She shook her head, walls slamming back into place. "Leave, please. If you ever cared about me at all, just leave. Pat studied her in the fading light. The woman he'd loved was still there, buried under layers of fear and secrets. Whatever had driven her away, whatever threat she perceived, it was real to her, real enough for 8 years of hiding. "This isn't over," he said finally. "I'm not giving up, not on you, not on our son." "He's not." "Jordan," Pat said softly, tasting the name like wine. "His name is Jordan. He plays piano like me, has my eyes, and somewhere deep down, Lynn, you know I have a right to know him." He left without waiting for a response, but not before seeing a single tear escape down her cheek, catching the last rays of sunlight. Outside, Pat sat in his car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Through the studio windows, he saw Lynn sink to the floor, shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Every instinct screamed to run back up there to hold her, to demand answers. His phone rang, his mother, again. This time, he answered. "Patrick, this nonsense has gone on long enough. The Blackwells are threatening to sue. Serena is..." "Did you threaten her, mother?" Silence stretched between them. Then, carefully, "I don't know what you mean. 8 years ago. Lynn, did you threaten her?" "That girl was nothing but trouble. A gold digger who would have..." Pat hung up. The pieces were falling into place like a dark puzzle, though the picture remained incomplete. His mother had done something, said something, that terrified Lynn into disappearing with their unborn child. He started the engine, pulling away from the curb. Through his rearview mirror, he watched the studio lights go dark one by one. This was indeed a dangerous game, but Pat had learned something crucial. Tonight, Lynn wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting Jordan. From what, he didn't yet know. But he would find out. Whatever secrets she harbored, whatever threats she feared, whatever his mother had done, Pat would uncover it all. Then he'd bring his family home where they belonged. The game was just beginning, and Pat intended to win. His mother had orchestrated Lynn's disappearance somehow. He was certain of that now. But the specifics, the threats that still terrified Lynn after 8 years, remained shrouded in mystery. As he drove through Brooklyn's darkening streets, neon signs flickering to life, Pat made a series of calculated decisions. First, hire security to protect Lynn and Jordan without their knowledge. Second, investigate his mother's activities from 8 years ago thoroughly. Third, find a way to earn Lynn's trust again. Jordan had looked at him with such curiosity, such intelligence shining in those familiar green eyes. Even in that brief encounter, Pat had seen himself in the boy's mannerisms, his protective instincts, his perceptive questions. His phone buzzed with another message from his mother. "If you don't respond, I'll come to your apartment. We need to discuss damage control immediately." Pat pulled over and typed, "The only thing we need to discuss is what you did to my wife and son 8 years ago." He sent it, then turned off his phone completely. Eleanor Wilkinson had controlled his life for too long. That ended now. Tomorrow, he would return to the studio. He would be patient, persistent, respectful. He would prove he could protect them from whatever his mother had threatened. Because now he knew the truth. He had a son, and nothing would keep him from claiming his rightful place in Jordan's life. The abandoned wedding, the society scandal, his family's fury, none of it mattered compared to the fierce joy of knowing he was a father. The storm from the cathedral was gathering its true force, but this time, Pat welcomed it. This time, he had something worth fighting for. Jordan. His son had a name, a face, a voice. His son existed, brilliant and protective, and playing piano like his father. The dangerous game had begun, but for the first time in 8 years, Pat felt truly alive. Chapter 4. Forced Proximity. The first note slipped under Lynn's apartment door 3 nights after Pat's studio visit, sliding across the hardwood floor with a whisper of menace. Simple white paper, block letters pressed hard enough to indent the page like scars. "You can't hide forever." She'd tried dismissing it initially. Perhaps a disgruntled dance student angry about a criticism, or a competitive parent from Jordan's school who'd lost out on a solo. The building had security cameras after all, and the doorman knew everyone. But finding her car tires slashed the next morning in the supposedly secure parking garage shattered that illusion. The second note, left inside her locked apartment on the kitchen counter next to Jordan's cereal bowl, made her blood freeze. "Whores who trap rich men pay the price." The third arrived with a photograph that sent her into full panic. Jordan, walking home from school, his navy blazer unmistakable, captured by a telephoto lens from across the street. He was smiling, talking to his friend Marcus, completely unaware of the danger. On the back, written in the same aggressive hand, "Beautiful. Boy, shame if something happened." Her hands shook so badly she could barely dial the number she'd sworn never to use. Pat answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Lynn? I need help." The admission burned her throat like acid. 8 years of fierce independence, of never needing anyone, of building a life alone, all crumbling against the threat to her son. 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, taking in her trembling hands, the scattered notes on her kitchen table, her compulsive checking of window locks and door chains. His face darkened progressively as he read each message, jaw clenching with barely contained rage, a muscle ticking beneath his ear. "How long?" "Since your studio visit." She couldn't meet his eyes, shame mixing with fear. "Someone's been watching us, following Jordan to school, to his piano lessons." Pat was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone in clipped tones. Within an hour, a discreet security team arrived, serious professionals in dark suits who swept her apartment for surveillance devices and positioned themselves strategically around the building. "Pack bags," Pat said once they were alone again. "You and Jordan can't stay here. We're not abandoning our home because someone entered your locked apartment, Lynn. They know Jordan's school, his schedule. They're escalating." His eyes, so like their son's, held steel beneath the concern. "I have a guest house, separate entrance, full security system, completely private, just until we identify the threat." Lynn wanted to refuse, to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to build. But that photograph, Jordan unaware, vulnerable, trusting in his safety, decided for her. "Temporarily. And Jordan can't know about the threats. I don't want him scared." 3 hours later, they were settling into Pat's guest house, a stunning, modern structure tucked behind his Tribeca brownstone. All glass and clean lines, it felt like a sanctuary. Jordan had embraced the adventure with 7-year-old enthusiasm, especially when he'd spotted the grand piano through the garden windows. "Mama, look. Mr. Pat has the same piano as Mrs. Patterson, a real Steinway." His excitement fogged the glass where he pressed his face. "Can I play it, please?" "After we unpack." Pat had already opened the garden door connecting the properties. "Any time you want, Jordan. That piano hasn't been properly used in years. It needs someone who appreciates it." The joy transforming their son's face made Pat's chest visibly tighten. With Lynn's nod of permission, Jordan raced across the garden with 7-year-old abandon. "Careful!" Lynn called automatically, then turned to Pat. "You didn't need to." "I wanted to. He's gifted. Instruments shouldn't sit silent." Following Jordan inside, they found him reverently touching the Steinway's keys, his small fingers caressing the ivory with a musician's respect. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, painting everything golden. Jordan played a scale, testing the piano's voice, then launched into a Mozart piece with surprising sophistication. "Extraordinary," Pat murmured, his eyes never leaving Jordan's hands, hands that moved with his own precise technique. "He practices constantly. Sometimes I have to force him to stop for homework." Pride and sadness mingled in Lynn's tone, acknowledgement of all the moments Pat had missed. "What does he know?" Lynn stiffened defensively. "His father died a hero, nothing more." "Lynn, not now." She indicated Jordan with a subtle gesture, absorbed in music but perceptive to undercurrents. Days settled into an unexpected routine. Pat worked from home, maintaining respectful distance while ensuring comprehensive security. Lynn continued teaching at her studio, with discreet protection shadowing her. Jordan flourished in the new environment, dividing time between piano practice, garden exploration, and homework at Pat's dining table, while his father worked nearby. The forced proximity became exquisite torture for both adults. Pat watched Lynn inhabit his space with ghosted familiarity, claiming the window seat for reading in afternoon light, humming Cole Porter while cooking, moving with dancer's grace through mundane tasks. 8 years had refined her confidence, added depth to her beauty, but her essence remained unchanged. One evening, as Jordan practiced a particularly challenging Chopin etude, Lynn found Pat in his study. Photographs covered the walls, their youthful faces carefully preserved behind newer frames, hidden but never discarded. "You kept them." She touched an image of herself laughing at some forgotten joke, snow in her hair from their last winter together. "Everything. Your paintings, poetry notebooks, even that terrible clay vase from your ceramics phase." "I have our wedding photo," she admitted quietly, not meeting his eyes. "Hidden from Jordan, but I couldn't destroy it." "Why didn't you come to me?" "When you discovered the pregnancy. Your mother—" "Forget my mother. You were my wife, carrying my child. Why didn't you trust me?" Pain flashed across her features. "Because she convinced me you knew, showed me photographs, you with other women at society events, documents with your signature, said the marriage was adolescent rebellion, but pregnancy required clean solutions." All lies. I know that now, but then, 22, pregnant, terrified. She had lawyers, Pat, official-looking papers threatening deportation for my mother, declarations of mental instability, promises to take the baby immediately after birth, witnesses ready to testify I was unstable, violent. Pat's fists clenched. Reflexively, my own mother orchestrated every detail, protecting you in her twisted logic, protecting herself from judgment, from change, from accepting someone she deemed beneath our social standing. Their conversation was interrupted by Pat's phone. The security chief's voice carried tension. "We've apprehended someone attempting to breach the gate. You need to see this." Outside, security had detained a young man clutching camera equipment and a manila envelope, his face pale under the security lights. "Just a messenger," he protested, voice shaking. "Someone paid me to deliver this and photograph whoever received it. Cash transaction, no names." The envelope contained surveillance photos. Lynn at her studio, Jordan at school, Pat entering his office building. The final image chilled them both. Lynn and Jordan through the guest house window, taken that very evening while Jordan practiced piano. Below, in familiar block letters, "Money won't protect them. Leave New York or watch them disappear." "That's it," Pat declared, crumpling the photo. "We're calling police." "No!" Lynn's voice carried firm conviction despite her fear. "Whoever this is has resources, connections. Police involvement won't stop them." "Then what do you suggest?" "We find them first. End this permanently." The fierce determination in her eyes reminded Pat why he'd fallen in love. Beneath fear and maternal protection lurked the warrior who'd captivated him. "Together?" "Together. But first, Jordan needs partial truth. He's too observant not to notice security changes. Better we control the narrative than let him create his own. From the house drifted piano music, Jordan playing the lullaby Pat had composed. For Lynn years ago, the melody hauntingly beautiful in their son's hands. Neither had taught him. He'd discovered and learned it independently. He knows, Pat said softly. Maybe not everything, but he senses connections. Lynn nodded, squaring her shoulders with dancer's discipline. Then it's time for some honesty. Not complete truth. He's too young, but enough for safety. They walked inside together, united, in purpose despite lingering distrust. Afternoon light had shifted to dusk, casting long shadows across polished floors. Jordan looked up as they approached, his eyes, Pat's eyes, bright with curiosity and something else, hope. The game continued to escalate, but now they faced it together. Whatever secrets remained, whatever threats loomed, they would confront them as what they'd always been, even through 8 years of separation. Pat's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath his ear. A family. That night, after Jordan was asleep, Pat found Lynn standing by the garden windows, watching the main house. Moonlight silvered her profile, highlighting the worry lines that hadn't been there 8 years ago. "I keep thinking about the photographs," she said without turning. "How long has someone been watching? What else have they seen? We'll find out. My investigators are tracking the messenger, the paper trail, everything." "Your mother?" "I don't know. This feels different from her style. More direct, more violent." Lynn wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he recognized as self-comfort. "I've spent 8 years looking over my shoulder, Pat. 8 years of checking locks twice, varying routes to work, teaching Jordan to be aware of strangers. I thought we were safe. I thought we'd disappeared completely." "You had. My investigator is the best in the business, and it took him 3 days to find you. Whoever this is, they've been watching for a while. Or they never stopped watching." The implication chilled them both. If someone had been monitoring Lynn and Jordan for years, waiting for Pat to find them. "We should tell Jordan tomorrow," Lynn decided. "Not everything, but enough to keep him safe. He needs to understand why things are changing. How do you tell a 7-year-old that someone wants to hurt him because of who his father is? Carefully, honestly, with just enough truth to protect him without stealing his innocence." Pat moved to stand beside her, their reflections ghost-like in the window. "I'm sorry, Lynn, for all of it, for not protecting you 8 years ago, for not being there when Jordan was born, for bringing danger back into your lives now. You didn't know. I should have seen through my mother's lies, should have searched harder. You searched for months. I know. I had friends watching for you. You hired investigators, visited my old haunts, called everyone I'd ever mentioned, but your mother was thorough. New identity, new city, new life. We vanished because we had to. And now? Now we face whatever comes, together. For Jordan's sake, as if speaking his name had summoned him, they heard small footsteps on the stairs. Jordan appeared in dinosaur pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mama, Dad, I mean Mr. Pat, I had a bad dream." The almost slip didn't go unnoticed. Lynn held out her arms, and Jordan ran to her, burying his face against her side. "What did you dream about, baby?" "A bad man was chasing us, like at the church, but this time he caught us." Lynn's eyes met Pat's over their son's head. Tomorrow's conversation had just become more urgent. "You're safe," Pat said, kneeling to Jordan's level. "I promise. No one's going to hurt you or your mom." Jordan studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "Promise?" "Promise." "Pinky promise?" Pat held out his pinky, and Jordan linked his smaller one with it. The simple gesture carried weight, beyond its innocence. "Can I sleep with you tonight, Mama?" "Of course, but just for tonight." As Lynn led Jordan back upstairs, Pat heard his son whisper, "I wish Mr. Pat was my dad. He has the same eyes as me." The words pierced Pat's heart. Tomorrow, Jordan would learn the truth. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he stood guard over his family, even if they didn't yet know that's what they were. Chapter 5. Breaking Point. The wine cellar had served as Pat's childhood sanctuary since he was old enough to navigate the narrow stairs. Built during Prohibition by his grandfather, a man who'd turned bootlegging profits into legitimate fortune, it sprawled beneath the brownstone in temperature-controlled chambers, holding thousands of bottles worth small fortunes. As a boy, he'd hidden here during his parents' explosive arguments, finding solace in the cool silence and orderly rows of dusty bottles, each label a promise of better times. Now it became their prison. The lockdown happened without warning. Pat was giving Lynn a tour while Jordan napped upstairs, showing her the rare vintages his father had collected, sharing stories behind certain bottles. They'd been laughing about a particularly ugly label from the 70s when hydraulic hisses announced the sealing of steel doors. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish crimson as an electronic voice declared, "Security breach detected, lockdown protocol engaged, vault sealed for 48 hours unless manually overridden by authorized." Personnel? What's happening? Lynn spun, dancer's grace replaced by maternal panic. "Jordan, he's alone upstairs." Pat was already at the control panel, fingers flying over the keypad, entering override codes the system rejected with angry electronic beeps. Malfunction or deliberate trigger? Deliberate. By whom? The question hung in recycled air as Pat's phone displayed no service. The landline produced only static. Even the emergency communication system showed interference patterns. "Someone with inside knowledge," Pat said grimly, his mind racing through possibilities. "Someone with access codes." Lynn pressed against the door as if will alone could open. Hit her palms flat against cold steel. "Jordan will wake up frightened when he can't find me. He still has nightmares from the church incident." "Maria's there. Security team too. He's safe, Lynn." "You don't know that." "Whoever's orchestrating this got into my apartment, knows our routines, has been photographing Jordan." She stopped as realization dawned, her face paling in the red light. "Your mother has access." Pat's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath. His ear. She wouldn't what? Traumatize a 7-year-old to achieve her goals. She threatened to institutionalize me when pregnant. She's capable of anything. The cellar maintained a steady 55 degrees, perfect for wine preservation, uncomfortable for humans not dressed for it. Pat draped his suit jacket around Lynn's shoulders. She wore only a thin silk blouse and skirt, dressed for the unseasonably warm October day above. 2 days. Her voice had shrunk, sounding very small in the vast space. "Unless someone overrides externally, the protocol protects against theft. My father's paranoia about his investments. Your family and their protocols." But she pulled his jacket tighter, his familiar scent offering unwanted comfort. They exhausted every option, searching for manual overrides hidden behind wine racks, attempting to hotwire electronic locks with Pat's limited knowledge, checking for forgotten maintenance access panels. But the cellar was a fortress, designed by paranoid wealth to be impenetrable. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Emergency lighting cast hellish shadows, transforming familiar spaces into alien territory. They'd found water, imported bottles for tastings, but no food. The silence pressed against their ears, broken only by the hum of climate control. "Tell me about Jordan," Pat said eventually, attempting distraction from her spiraling worry. "Everything I missed." Lynn sat on a wooden wine crate, legs drawn up protectively, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd seen since their reunion. Born during a blizzard, February 15th, 3 weeks early. Labor started while teaching. Ballet in Detroit. Detroit, my savings limit. Found work at a community center teaching children's dance. Lived in a studio apartment so cramped the bed folded into the wall. Her smile held bittersweet memory. 16 hours of labor, kept imagining how different it would have been with you there. Pat sat beside her, careful not to touch. Her presence overwhelmed in the confined space. Subtle perfume mixing with wine. Cellar must, radiating warmth, unconscious grace, even while still. The moment they placed him in my arms, I saw you, she continued, voice soft with memory. Your eyes, your chin, that stubborn set already evident in a newborn. I cried for hours. Nurses attributed it to hormones, but I was grieving. For you, for us, for the family we should have been. I'm sorry. Words felt pathetically inadequate. Sorry you endured that alone. Not alone. I had him. From that first moment, Jordan became everything. Smiled at 6 weeks, earlier than most babies. Walked at 10 months with such determination, like he had places to go. First word at 11. Months. What was it? Piano. She laughed, the sound echoing off stone walls. Not mama or dada like normal babies. We were in a music store, and he pointed clearly stating piano. The charmed owner allowed weekly visits until I saved enough to purchase one. He found my composition, Pat said. The lullaby. Learned it independently. I hummed it during his infancy. For nightmares, restlessness, never realized he'd internalized the melody. Comfortable silence settled between them, weighted with shared history. Without windows or clocks, time became fluid. The eternal crimson twilight offered no orientation. I'm cold, Lynn finally admitted, shivering despite the jacket. Pat moved. Closer, offering body heat without presumption. May I? She nodded, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She stiffened initially, then gradually relaxed against him. Their first intentional touch in 8 years sent electricity coursing through both. I dreamed of you, she whispered into the semi-darkness. Nightly for months. Sometimes I'd wake expecting you beside me, finding only empty space. Same. Serena complained about me calling your name while sleeping. Did you love her? Never. I tried. Wanted desperately to move forward, become the son mother expected, but she wasn't you. No one could be. Lynn turned, their faces inches apart in the crimson light. I convinced myself you'd forgotten, moved on to someone appropriate, fitting your world. You fit my world. You were my world. His free hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Still are. The kiss was inevitable. Tentative initially, 8 years of hurt compressed into gentle contact. Then Lynn made a small sound, part sob, part sigh, and deepened it. Her hands fisted his shirt, pulling closer. He tasted salt from her tears, felt her trembling. Breaking apart left them both breathless, foreheads touching. We can't, Lynn whispered unconvincingly. Why? Because I'm terrified. Once I let you in again, losing you would destroy me. And, Jordan, I'm not leaving, never again. She searched his eyes for truth, promises, redemption. Whatever she found precipitated another kiss, hungrier. Years of denial crumbling like ancient walls. They created a makeshift bed from packing blankets discovered in storage, the stone floor unforgiving but neither caring. In the cellar's crimson twilight, they found each other again, not just physically but spiritually. Every touch conveyed conversations, each kiss an apology, whispered endearments becoming promises of tomorrow. Afterward, they lay entwined, Lynn's head on Pat's chest, listening to his heartbeat. His fingers combed through her loosened hair, still silk-soft as memory. "I never stopped loving you," she confessed. "Tried desperately, but you were always present." In Jordan's eyes, his laugh, how he tilts his head while thinking. "Marry me again," Pat said suddenly. "Properly, with Jordan as best man in daylight where everyone can witness." "Pat, I know obstacles remain. Mother, these threats, 8 years of hurt requiring navigation. But I also know I want to wake beside you forever. Want to teach Jordan baseball, help with homework, attend every birthday I've missed." Before she could respond, fluorescent lights flickered on with harsh brilliance, electronic locks disengaged with mechanical clicks. The door slid open, revealing security guards and Maria, their faces taut with worry. "Sir, we've tried overriding. In for hours. Are you all right?" But Pat only had eyes for Lynn, hastily finger-combing her hair and adjusting disheveled clothing. "Fine. Where's Jordan?" "Asleep upstairs," he worried, but Maria explained a wine emergency. They emerged to find dawn breaking over the city, painting everything in soft pastels. 36 hours had elapsed in their underground cocoon. The world looked different, sharper, more vivid, pregnant with possibility. "Mama?" Jordan appeared, atop the stairs, descending at dangerous speed. "Where were you? Maria said you were stuck." Lynn caught him fiercely, breathing his little boy scent of shampoo and dreams. Over his head, she met Pat's gaze. His proposal hung between them, unanswered, but not rejected. "We're here now, baby. We're all here." Pat's hand found Jordan's shoulder. For a moment they stood united, an almost family, fragile but no longer broken. The cellar interlude had been a breaking point, but like bones healing stronger after fracture, they'd emerged more solid. Later, security reported evidence of system tampering, sophisticated electronic manipulation suggesting inside knowledge. Pat would confront his mother, who'd deny involvement with Arctic hauteur. Threats would continue, escalating toward confrontation none could yet imagine. But in this moment, with morning sun painting everything golden, they were simply 3 people bound by blood and love and the promise of what might be. The game continued, but the players had changed. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The breaking point had become a turning point, and there was no going back. As Jordan chatted about his adventure with Maria, how they'd made cookies, and watched movies to distract from worry, Pat caught Lynn's eye. She touched her lips unconsciously, remembering their kisses, then nodded almost imperceptibly. His proposal had been accepted, even if words hadn't been spoken. In the kitchen, making breakfast together while Jordan practiced piano in the next room, they moved with new synchronicity. Their hands brushed, reaching for coffee mugs, shoulders touched while scrambling eggs, and each contact carried promise. "Tonight," Lynn said quietly, "after Jordan's asleep, we need to talk. About everything." "Everything," Pat agreed, understanding. The weight of that word. 8 years of secrets, lies, and love demanded honest conversation. But first, they had a son to protect, a stalker to identify, and a life to rebuild from carefully preserved fragments. The wine cellar had been their breaking point. What came next would be their becoming. Chapter 6. Jealous Hearts. Miguel Santos arrived Tuesday morning like a tropical storm hitting Manhattan's measured streets. He emerged from his silver Porsche with practiced grace, the morning sun catching highlights in his perfectly styled black hair, white linen shirt contrasting against bronze skin, tailored pants emphasizing a dancer's powerful legs, 6 feet of Cuban-Spanish charm, with shoulders that spoke of years of professional training and predatory eyes that catalogued opportunities like a cat watching birds. Pat watched from his office window as Miguel swept Lynn off her feet in the driveway. lifting her with unnecessary flourish and spinning her in a move that belonged on stage, not in a private garden. The familiar way Miguel's hands lingered at her waist, their shared laughter carrying across the morning air, her delayed step back from his embrace. Everything ignited jealousy Pat hadn't experienced since college rivals had dared to approach Lynn. "That him?" James asked from behind, coffee mug in hand. His best friend had come to discuss security upgrades, but found himself witnessing an entirely different threat. Miguel Santos, professional dancer, former partner from her Detroit days. Dance partner. Or former partner? James's tone carried knowing skepticism. Pat's knuckles whitened against the windowsill, wood creaking under his grip. "She says just dance." "Right, and I'm just friends with my Swedish massage therapist named Inga." Lynn had called Miguel after receiving a prestigious Lincoln Center invitation, a gala performance that could resurrect her stalled career and provide financial security for Jordan's future. She needed a partner, and Miguel was supposedly the best in the business. Pat had agreed through clenched teeth, recognizing the opportunity's importance while hating every second of it. Now, watching Miguel follow Lynn into their converted rehearsal space with a proprietary hand on her lower back, Pat questioned his magnanimity. 3 days of artistic torture followed. Their chosen piece, contemporary tango fusion, demanded intimate physical contact that made Pat's blood boil, and his hands clench involuntarily. Through glass doors that might as well have been a theater screen, he watched Miguel's hands traverse Lynn's body with practiced familiarity, their bodies synchronizing with years of muscle memory, moving together like lovers who knew each other's rhythms intimately. The breaking point came during Wednesday afternoon's rehearsal. They were working on a particularly sensual lift sequence. Miguel's hands, starting at Lynn's waist, sliding down to her hips with deliberate slowness, before pulling her against him in a move that belonged in a bedroom, not a dance studio. There, bodies pressed together from chest to thigh, her back arched in surrender, his face buried in her neck. When the music ended, he held the position too long, whispering something that made her laugh breathlessly, the sound carrying through the closed doors. Then he kissed her. Quick, barely a brush of lips that could be dismissed as professional, affection or artistic exuberance. But Pat caught Miguel's calculated glance toward the window, dark eyes checking if he'd been observed, a small smirk playing at his lips. He had. Pat crossed the room before conscious decision formed, door slamming, open with enough force to rattle the mirrors. "Rehearsal's over. We just started the second act," Miguel protested, arm still draped possessively around Lynn's waist, fingers spreading against her ribs. "The performance is in 5 days." I said, finished. Pat's voice carried quiet menace, the dangerous calm. Before violence. Lynn stepped between them, confusion evident in her flushed face. "Pat, what's wrong? We need to ask him about the telephoto lens in his car. Ask why he's been photographing you and Jordan." Color drained from Lynn's face as she turned to Miguel. The dancer's carefully maintained charm slipped momentarily. Long, enough for guilt to flash across his handsome features before he recovered. "Miguel, Linny mi amor. It's not what you think." "Don't call her that." Pat's voice dropped dangerously, fists clenching at his sides. Recognition dawned on Lynn's face like a horrible sunrise. The threats, the notes, the photos. That was you? Miguel's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, revealing something ugly beneath. Obsession masquerading as love. Possession dressed as protection. "I've loved you for years," he said, words tumbling out desperately in accented English. "Since before you disappeared with his..." He caught himself, jaw clenching. "When you vanished from Detroit, I searched everywhere, found you 2 years ago, watched you struggle alone with the boy. I was planning to approach properly, court. You like you deserve, but then he showed up at that wedding, and I knew I had to act fast. You terrorized us, threatened my son. Lynn's voice shook with maternal rage. I'd never hurt Jordan. I just needed you to see you required protection, someone who understood you, your art, your world, not some rich boy who abandoned you once. Already, Pat's fist connected with Miguel's jaw before anyone registered movement. The dancer went down hard, blood streaming from his nose, staining the white linen shirt. Years of suppressed rage channeled into that single blow. Rage at the man who'd stalked his family, who dared to touch what was his. Pat, stop! Lynn grabbed his arm as he advanced on the fallen dancer. But Pat hauled Miguel up by his shirt, fabric tearing. You sent those threats, broke into her apartment, photographed my son. Your son? Miguel laughed wetly, blood bubbling from his lips. You didn't know he existed until last week. I've watched over them 2 years. I know Jordan's favorite foods, mac and cheese with hot dogs cut up in it. His bedtime stories, always wanting 2 chapters of Harry Potter, which books he prefers, anything. With dragons, where were you? The words hit their mark. Pat's grip loosened fractionally, doubt flickering. Living a lie because people like you think they know what's best for Lynn. Pat's voice turned lethal. But you're done. Done watching, done threatening, done existing in their world. You think you've won? Your mother knows about me. Encourage this whole thing. Miguel's accent thickened with pain and anger. Said, if I could win Lynn away, she'd make it worthwhile. Gave me security codes, schedules, inside information. Pat dropped him in shock, Miguel crumpling to the polished floor. My mother's behind this? Miguel's laugh turned ugly, tinged with madness. Eleanor Wilkinson doesn't like losing to the help's daughter. She knew about my feelings, contacted me 6 months ago when her investigator reported you were having Lynn followed. Promised if I could convince Lynn to leave permanently, with or without the boy, she'd fund my own dance company, set me up in Miami, New York, wherever I wanted. The revelation recontextualized everything. Pat stood frozen, processing his mother's continued manipulations. Not just 8 years ago, but now, still orchestrating lives like chess pieces, still fighting a war she'd already lost. Get out, Miguel. Lynn's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Get out, and never return. Linny, don't. You were my friend. I trusted you. When Jordan had the flu, you brought soup. When I couldn't afford the studio rent, you covered it. Tears of rage and betrayal streamed down her face. And all that time, you were watching, waiting, planning. Miguel struggled upright, holding his bleeding nose with one hand. This isn't over, Eleanor promised. Eleanor's promises are poison, Pat interrupted. Take the lesson and run, because if I see you near my family again, a broken nose will be the least of your problems. After Miguel slunk out, clutching his face and muttering about assault charges in rapid Spanish, Pat and Lynn stood amid the afternoon's wreckage. Trust shattered, illusions destroyed, Eleanor's ongoing machinations exposed like a festering wound. I need to file police reports. Get restraining orders. Lynn's voice sounded numb, hollow. I'll handle everything. Pat moved toward her, but she stepped back, arms wrapping around herself. Don't. I can't. I trusted him. 2 years in Detroit, he helped with Jordan when I was sick, covered my classes when I couldn't afford childcare. We had dinners together, movie nights. Jordan called him Uncle Miguel. All that time, he was watching, wanting, waiting for his chance. How did I miss it? I'm trained to read body language, to see what people hide. How did I miss this? Because you see good in people. It's what I love about you. The word hung between them. Love. Present tense. Acknowledged in daylight for the first time since their reunion. Jordan's voice from the doorway shattered the moment. Why is there blood on the floor? Did someone get hurt? They turned to find their son wide-eyed in his school uniform, backpack sliding off one shoulder, face pale with worry. Maria hovered behind, clearly having tried preventing his entry. "There was an accident," Lynn said quickly, moving to shield him from the blood spots on the polished floor. "But everything's okay now." Jordan's perceptive gaze moved between his. Parents reading the tension like a book. "Was it the man who's been following us? The one taking pictures?" Both adults froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I've seen him outside school at the park near Mrs. Patterson's when I have piano. He pretends he's not watching, but I noticed. He has a camera with a big lens." Jordan's face was serious beyond his years. "I didn't say anything because I thought maybe he was helping Dad." The casual "dad" made Pat's throat constrict with emotion. Jordan looked directly at Pat, those green eyes holding wisdom beyond his years. "You are my dad, aren't you? Mama said my father died, but you look just like me, play piano like me. Sometimes Mama looks at you the way she looks at my baby pictures." Truth hung crystalline in the air, unavoidable now. Lynn knelt before their son, tears threatening. "Jordan, baby, we need to talk. There are things I should have told you sooner." "Is Mr. Pat really my dad?" "Yes," Pat answered, kneeling beside them, forming a small circle on the studio floor. "I'm your father. I didn't know about you for a long time, but I'm here now, and I'm never leaving again." Jordan studied him with that penetrating gaze, processing this revelation. Then, without warning, he launched himself at Pat, small arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. "I knew it. I knew you were special. I used to dream about meeting my dad, and you looked just like I imagined." Over their son's head, Pat met Lynn's eyes. The complications hadn't ended. Miguel's revelations about Eleanor made everything infinitely worse. But in this moment, with Jordan clinging to him and Lynn's hand tentatively touching his arm, they were united in truth. The performance would be cancelled. Police reports filed. Tomorrow, Pat would confront his mother about her latest betrayal, this ongoing war against their family. But today, in a rehearsal room spotted with blood and broken trust, a different truth emerged. They were a family. Fractured, threatened, complicated, but undeniably bound together by more than DNA. Miguel's jealous games had backfired spectacularly. Instead of driving them apart, he'd forced them to acknowledge what they all knew, but feared voicing. They belonged together. The battle lines were clearer now. Eleanor Wilkinson would stop at nothing to separate them. But Pat had something his mother hadn't counted on. Not just love, but the fierce protectiveness of a father, and the determination of a man who'd lost 8 years and refused to lose another day. The game continued, but stakes had changed. Now it wasn't just about Pat and Lynn finding their way back to each other. Now it was about protecting their son from a grandmother who saw him as a mistake to be erased rather than a grandchild to cherish. "Dad?" Jordan's voice was muffled against Pat's shoulder. "Are we safe now?" Pat held him tighter, meeting Lynn's eyes over their son's head. "We're together. That's what matters." But they all knew the war was far from over. If anything, it had just begun. Chapter 7. The Truth Unleashed. The call shattered the 3 a.m. silence like a scream in a cathedral. "Mr. Wilkinson?" The voice was professionally calm but carried undertones of urgency. "This is Dr. Martinez at St. Mary's Hospital. Your mother has been admitted with a severe cardiac event. She's asking for you. It's critical." Pat sat up, instantly alert, his mind clearing from sleep in seconds. Beside him, Lynn stirred in the chair where she'd fallen asleep reading security. Reports, her laptop still glowing with data. They'd been sharing these night vigils since Miguel's exposure, neither ready for solitude, both drawing comfort from proximity. How serious? Critical but stable for now. She's conscious and insisting on seeing you immediately, and she's asking for Mrs. Wilkinson and your son as well." The formal address tightened Pat's chest. The hospital still had Lynn listed as his wife from 8 years ago. They'd never officially divorced, a legal complication now feeling like destiny's hand at work. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. Pat?" Lynn was fully awake now, maternal instinct attuned to trouble, her dancer's body already tensing for action. "What's wrong?" "My mother. Heart attack. She's asking for all of us." Lynn's face hardened, protective walls slamming up. "After what she's done?" "I know, but she's asking for Jordan too, by name." They exchanged weighted looks, both thinking the same thoughts. Eleanor Wilkinson had never acknowledged Jordan's existence, had gone to extreme lengths to erase him, for her to request him now, possibly on her deathbed. "I'll wake him," Lynn said finally, her voice carrying resignation. "But if she says one word to hurt him, she won't. I won't allow it." The drive to the hospital felt surreal, dreamlike. Manhattan at 4 a.m. was a different city, empty streets glistening with October rain, traffic lights blinking for no one, skyscrapers standing like silent sentinels. Jordan dozed in the back seat, dinosaur pajamas visible beneath his hastily grabbed coat, his small face peaceful in sleep. He'd taken the news with sleepy acceptance, too young to grasp the gravity, but old enough to sense the tension radiating from his parents. They found Eleanor in the cardiac ICU, diminished among the forest of tubes and monitors. Without her armor of Chanel suits and imperial bearing, without perfectly coiffed hair and strategic jewelry, she looked frighteningly human, just another fragile body fighting for life. The woman who'd terrorized boardrooms and commanded society. Events lay vulnerable against stark hospital white. Her eyes opened as they entered, immediately fixing on Jordan with intensity that made Lynn step protectively closer, her hand finding his shoulder. "Patrick." Eleanor's voice was weak, stripped of its usual command, barely above a whisper. "You brought them. You asked for them." Eleanor's gaze never left Jordan, studying him with desperate hunger. "He looks exactly like you did. Same eyes. My father's eyes, same stubborn chin, even the way he stands slightly favoring his left foot." "His name is Jordan," Lynn said steadily, her voice carrying steel beneath civility. "He's 7 years old. He plays piano brilliantly, concert level already, loves dinosaurs and astronomy. He's kind, intelligent, curious. He's everything you tried to prevent." Eleanor flinched visibly, as if struck. "I was protecting yourself." Pat cut in, anger barely controlled. "Your image, your prejudices, never me." "You don't understand." Tears slipped down Eleanor's pale cheeks, the first time Pat had ever seen his mother cry. "I was terrified. My whole life has been about running. From where I came from. What are you talking about?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter, wet with tears and regret. "You think you know our family history, the Wilkinson legacy? Your grandfather didn't marry down. I did. My mother was Dominican, a maid for the Fairchild family in their Fifth Avenue mansion." The revelation hit Pat like a physical blow. His mother, who'd wielded bloodlines like weapons, who'd destroyed his marriage over Lynn's background. Your grandfather fell in love with her, defied his entire family, lost everything. We lived in Spanish Harlem until I was 12, in a fourth-floor walk-up with bars on the windows, until his business finally succeeded through sheer determination. Eleanor's gaze found Lynn. "When I saw you with Patrick, saw history repeating, I panicked. All I could see was my mother, young, foreign, unsuitable by society's standards. I convinced myself I was saving Patrick from my fate. So you became exactly what you feared," Lynn said quietly. "You did to us what was done to your parents. Worse." Eleanor's voice broke completely. I became the monster I'd spent my whole life running from. When I discovered you were pregnant, all I saw was my mother, young, vulnerable, unprotected. I convinced myself I was protecting Patrick, but I was just afraid. So deeply afraid. The room fell silent except for steady monitor beeps, mechanical breathing of life support systems. Jordan tugged on Lynn's hand. Mama, why is the lady crying? Eleanor's eyes fixed on the boy with desperate hunger, tears flowing freely now. May I speak to him? Please. I know I don't deserve it, but... Lynn hesitated, protective instincts, warring with something Pat recognized as mercy. Finally, she nodded, guiding Jordan closer while maintaining protective contact. Hello, Eleanor said softly, her voice gentling. You must be Jordan. Yes, Ma'am. His manners were impeccable, despite uncertainty. Are you sick? Very sick. But seeing you makes me feel better. Jordan tilted his head, studying her with those penetrating eyes that missed nothing. You're Mr. Pat's mom. That makes you... He frowned, calculating relationships with 7-year-old logic. Are you my grandma? The simple question shattered Eleanor's remaining composure. Her face crumpled as the weight of what she'd denied, this brilliant, beautiful grandchild, hit fully. I would like to be, if you'll let me, if your parents can forgive me enough. Jordan looked up at Lynn, then Pat, sensing undercurrents beyond his comprehension. Mama? Lynn's face was a battlefield of emotions, anger, pain, reluctant compassion. I don't know, baby. She did things that hurt us all very much. When Tommy Parker was mean to me, then said sorry and shared his cookies, Mrs. Chen said sometimes people do bad things because they're scared inside. Jordan's child wisdom cut through adult complications. Are you scared inside, lady? Very scared, Eleanor admitted, voice breaking. I've been scared my whole life, and I let that fear make me cruel. But you're sorry now? More sorry than you could possibly understand. Jordan considered this gravely, then reached out and patted Eleanor's hand, the same hand that had signed documents meant to destroy his family. It's okay to be scared. Mama says being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing right, even when you are scared. Eleanor's tears flowed freely. Your mama is very wise. I should have listened to her years ago. Mother, Pat said, voice rough with suppressed emotion. Why now? Why reveal this now? Because I'm dying. The words fell like stones into still water. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but soon. My heart is failing, and the doctors say they recommend surgery, but chances aren't good. I couldn't leave this world with so much poison in my wake. She reached with trembling fingers for the call button, summoning a nurse. There's a safe in my study at home. The combination is... She looked at Jordan. The day you were born, February 15th. Inside are documents. Everything I had lawyers prepare 8 years ago. False psychiatric evaluations, deportation threats, custody papers, all of it. Proof of what I did. Why keep them? Lynn asked. Guilt, shame, some twisted need to remember. My sins, self-flagellation. Eleanor's energy was fading visibly. But there's more. Your father, Patrick, he knew. Left letters, a separate will. He searched for you, Lynn. Set up trusts I've been blocking. $50 million in properties, all in your name and Jordan's. His way of making right what I made wrong. Pat stared at his mother. This stranger who'd hidden behind a lifetime of careful lies. He knew what you did. He suspected. We fought constantly his last year. He hired investigators, found traces of my interference. His final words were about you, Lynn. He made me promise to make it right. I've spent 3 years breaking that promise daily. A doctor entered, checking monitors with professional efficiency. Mrs. Wilkinson needs rest. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. No surgery, Eleanor interrupted. Mother, I've spent my life fighting my past, fighting love, fighting truth. I'm tired, Patrick, so very tired. You can't just give up, Lynn said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare. Lynn, who had every reason to want Eleanor gone. Jordan just found his grandmother. You owe him more than a deathbed confession. Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. After everything I've done, I know what it's like to run from fear, to make terrible choices protecting your child. Lynn stepped closer to the bed. You want forgiveness? Earn it, live, fight, be the grandmother Jordan deserves. The room held its breath. Eleanor looked from Lynn to Pat to Jordan, seeing something she'd never expected, not just forgiveness, but hope. A chance at redemption she didn't deserve, but was being offered anyway. The surgery, she whispered. 50-50 odds, they say. Then, fight, Pat said, surprising himself. For once in your life, fight for the right reason. Jordan, with childhood's simple clarity, climbed partially onto the bed, careful of wires and tubes. Please don't die, Grandma. I just found you. The word, Grandma, broke through Eleanor's last defenses. She nodded weakly, reaching for the call button again with renewed determination. Doctor? About that surgery. As medical staff bustled in with consent forms and surgical schedules, the fractured family stood around the bed. Pat held Lynn's, and Jordan leaned against his father's side, and Eleanor looked at them with eyes finally clear of fear and prejudice. I'll try, she promised, voice stronger now. For him. For all of you. Hours later, as dawn painted the hospital windows pink and gold, they maintained their vigil. Eleanor slept fitfully, preparing for morning surgery. Jordan dozed in Pat's lap while Lynn stood by the window watching the city wake from its slumber. You didn't have to do that, Pat said quietly. Encourage her to fight, after everything. I did it for Jordan, and for us. Lynn turned from the window, morning light creating a halo effect. Hatred is exhausting. I've carried it 8 years, and I'm tired. If she truly wants to change, if she can be the grandmother Jordan deserves, isn't that better than more anger? Pat pulled her close with his free arm, careful not to wake Jordan. You're remarkable. I'm a mother. We do what we must for our children. She looked at Eleanor's sleeping form. Maybe she's finally learning that lesson too. As the sun rose over Manhattan, painting everything in gold and possibility, they waited. Tomorrow would bring surgery, uncertainty, the long path toward healing, both physical and emotional. There would be lawyers to deal with, trusts to unlock, years of wrongs to right. But for now, in this quiet room where truth had finally conquered fear, they were simply a family, complicated, damaged, but whole in ways that mattered most. The game Eleanor had played was over. In its place, something fragile but real was beginning to grow, the chance at what they should have had all along. A grandmother who chose love over fear, parents reunited by truth, a child who brought them all together with innocent wisdom and his father's eyes. The storm had broken. Now came the harder work of rebuilding in its wake. Chapter 8. Reclaiming Each Other. Thunder rolled over Manhattan like a drumbeat of fate, rattling windows in their frames. Pat stood at his bedroom window, watching lightning fracture the night sky in jagged patterns, while rain hammered the glass with increasing violence. Eleanor's surgery had been successful, barely. She'd flatlined twice on the operating table before stabilizing, her heart stopping for terrifying moments that aged him years. Now she lay in intensive care, her second chance hanging by the thinnest of threads. Jordan slept down the hall, exhausted from the hospital vigil, his small body finally succumbing to the emotional toll, which left Pat and Lynn alone for the first time since the wine cellar, the air between them charged with more than storm electricity. "You should rest," Pat said, without turning from the window. "It's been a long day. 36 hours without real sleep." "Can't sleep." Lynn's voice came from the doorway, soft but carrying an edge of restlessness. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her on that operating table. Keep wondering if I pushed too hard, if I should have let her die." Pat turned to find her wearing his Columbia t-shirt, the faded blue fabric falling to mid-thigh, her legs bare beneath. The sight hit him viscerally. Memories of countless nights when she'd worn his clothes, when her presence here had been natural as breathing. Maybe, does that make me terrible? No. Makes you human. Thunder crashed overhead, so close the building seemed to shake. The lights flickered ominously. "Come here." She hesitated momentarily, then crossed to him, bare feet silent on hardwood. In the flashing stormlight, her face showed vulnerability rarely revealed. "I don't know how to do this, Pat. How to trust again, how to let you back in when I've spent 8 years building walls brick by brick." "We go slow." "I'm tired of slow." The words burst out raw, urgent, tired of being careful, of fear ruling everything. "Your mother almost died today, and all I could think was how much time we've already wasted, how many moments we'll never get back." Lightning illuminated her face, revealing tears held back at the hospital now flowing freely. Pat reached for her, cupping her face in both hands, thumbs wiping moisture from her cheeks. "Lynn, I never stopped loving you." The confession broke something inside her, a dam finally bursting. "Tried so hard. God knows I tried. Dated a few times, attempting to move on, but every kiss felt wrong. Every touch felt like betrayal. You ruined me for anyone else." Control shattered completely. Pat pulled her against him, capturing her mouth in a kiss that tasted of years and tears and desperate longing. She responded, instantly, her body melting into his, hands fisting his shirt as if afraid he'd disappear. "I need you," she gasped against his mouth. "Need to feel alive again. Feel us again." They moved toward the bed in a tangle of urgent kisses and grasping hands. Pat's hands shook as he lifted the hem of her borrowed shirt, revealing skin he'd mapped in memories 1,000 times. She was different now, softer curves from motherhood, a surgical scar on her abdomen from Jordan's delivery, small marks that told the story of years apart. He traced the C-section scar reverently. "You're more beautiful now. This brought our son into the world." Tears slid into her hair. "I was terrified that night, in labor, alone, thinking I might die without you ever knowing about him, kept imagining how different it would be if I'm here now." Pat kissed away her tears, her regrets, each salt trace a promise. "I'm here, and I'm never leaving again." Their lovemaking was a conversation without words, tender then desperate, healing then hungry. 8 years dissolved as bodies remembered rhythms time hadn't erased. When Lynn cried out his name, Pat caught the sound with his mouth, aware of their son sleeping nearby. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets and satisfaction, Lynn's head on Pat's chest, listening to his heartbeat. The storm had gentled to steady rain, a soothing counterpoint to their breathing. "I used to dream about this," she confessed, fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "Not just the physical part, but this, lying here with you, feeling safe, feeling home." Marry me again." The words came without planning. "I know we're technically still married, but I want to do it right. With Jordan as ring bearer, our friends watching, your mother giving you away." Lynn propped herself on an elbow, hair falling like a curtain. "My mother still hasn't forgiven you for ruining her baby girl." "Then I'll win her over. Wine and dine her. Grovel, if necessary. Spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you both." She studied his face in the dim light, searching for something. "What about your mother? If she survives—" "When she survives," Pat corrected firmly. "She'll have to accept us, all of us. No more games, no manipulation. If she wants Jordan in her life, it's on our terms. And if she can't change, if the prejudice runs too deep, then she loses us, all of us." Pat's voice held steel beneath the softness. "I choose you, Lynn. Choose our son, choose our family. Everything else is negotiable." A soft knock interrupted them. "Mama? Dad?" They scrambled for clothes as Jordan's voice came through the door. "I had a bad dream about Grandma." "Come in, baby," Lynn called, pulling on Pat's shirt while he yanked on pajama pants. Jordan padded in, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, hair sticking up in endearing chaos. He took in the scene, his parents clearly in the same bed, rumpled sheets, the soft expressions of people who'd been kissing. "Did the storm scare you too?" he asked innocently. "Something like that," Pat said, lifting him onto the bed between them. Jordan snuggled into the space they created, sighing contentedly. "This is nice, like a real family." "We are a real family." Lynn smoothed his sleep-mussed hair. "But you and Dad aren't married, right? Tommy says real families have married parents." Pat and Lynn exchanged looks over their son's head. "Actually," Pat said carefully, "your mom and I are married, have been since before you were born." Jordan sat up, suddenly alert. "Really? But why didn't we all live together?" "It's complicated, buddy. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes." "Like Grandma did?" The perception startled them both. "Yes," Lynn said softly, "like Grandma did. But we're fixing those mistakes now." "Good." Jordan settled back down, apparently satisfied. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow to celebrate being a real family?" "Absolutely," Pat promised, ruffling his hair. Within minutes, Jordan was asleep. Between them, one small hand clutching Pat's finger, the other holding Lynn's. The storm had passed completely, leaving the city washed clean, stars visible between breaking clouds. "This is what I dreamed about," Lynn whispered across their son's sleeping form. "The three of us together. Safe." "No more dreams," Pat whispered. "Back. This is real. We're real." As dawn approached, painting the room in soft pastels, they dozed fitfully, unwilling to miss a moment of this newfound completeness. Later there would be conversations about the future, legal matters to settle, Eleanor's recovery to navigate. But for now, in the gentle morning light, they were simply what they'd always been meant to be, a family reunited, reclaiming love that 8 years of lies couldn't destroy. Pat woke to find Jordan and Lynn still sleeping, curled together like puzzle pieces finally fitting. He watched them breathe, memorizing this moment of perfect peace. His phone buzzed with a hospital update. Eleanor was stable, showing signs of improvement. He typed a quick response, then set the phone aside. The world could wait. This moment, his wife and son safe in his bed, morning light painting everything golden. This was worth 8 years of searching. "Pancakes," Jordan mumbled without opening his eyes. "You promised." "I did," Pat agreed, pressing a kiss to his son's forehead. "Chocolate chip or blueberry?" "Both," Jordan decided with 7-year-old logic. Lynn's eyes opened, finding Pat's across their son's head. "Both sounds perfect," she said softly. And it was. All of it. The storms had passed. The secrets were revealed. The healing had begun. They were home. Chapter 9. Family Storms. 3 weeks after Eleanor's surgery, she was finally moved from intensive care to a private room on the cardiac floor. Her recovery proved slower than hoped, the damage more extensive, her body responding sluggishly to treatment, each day a small battle won. But she was alive, drawing breath after breath, and allegedly transformed by her near-death experience. Pat remained skeptical. Years of manipulation, not easily forgotten. "She's different," Lynn insisted as they prepared for the daily hospital visit, checking Jordan's homework while making sandwiches. The way she looks at Jordan, the questions she asks about his life, how she listens when he talks. I think she's genuinely trying to understand who he is. Or she's playing another angle. Pat straightened his tie in the hallway mirror, his reflection showing the strain of recent weeks. Leopards don't change their spots overnight, neither do master manipulators. People aren't leopards. They can choose to be better. Lynn packed Jordan's snack with practiced efficiency. Sometimes facing death changes people fundamentally. Jordan bounced into their bedroom. He'd taken to calling it their room since the night of the storm, though Pat still maintained the pretense of a guest room for propriety's sake. "Is Grandma stronger today? Can I bring my piano book?" "She asked me to play yesterday, but the nurse said no. Too much excitement," she said. The casual acceptance of Eleanor as Grandma both warmed and worried Pat. His son's open heart was beautiful but vulnerable to disappointment. At the hospital, they found Eleanor sitting up for the first time in days, propped against multiple pillows. Her color was marginally improved, though she remained fragile as antique porcelain. Her face brightened genuinely when Jordan ran in, a smile transforming her worn features. "There's my pianist. Did you bring your music?" "Yes, and look." Jordan displayed a gold star sticker on his homework with pride. "Perfect score on my math test. Every problem right? Brilliant boy, just like your father was." Eleanor's gaze found Pat, something soft in her eyes, though considerably better behaved. "I was a perfect child," Pat protested mildly, settling into the visitor's chair. "You once tried selling your cousin Jeffrey to the circus because he broke your model airplane. For 50 cents and a snow cone, you'd drawn up a contract and everything." Jordan giggled, delighted by this glimpse of his father's childhood. "Did they take him?" "Sadly, no, though not for lack of negotiation on your father's part. He was quite the little businessman even then." These moments confused Pat most. This grandmother sharing fond memories with genuine warmth, delighting in Jordan's laughter without agenda, seemed entirely different from the woman who terrorized his marriage. Yet wariness remained, a guard he couldn't quite lower. The doctor entered with test results, his expression carefully neutral, the practiced face of someone about to deliver difficult news. "Mrs. Wilkinson, we need to discuss your options. The damage to your heart is more extensive than we'd initially hoped. While the surgery was technically successful, your long-term prognosis—" "How long?" Eleanor's voice stayed steady, her hands folded calmly. "With aggressive treatment, perhaps a year. Without it, considerably less, 3 to 6 months at most." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading through the room. Jordan, too young to fully grasp mortality but old enough to sense gravity, pressed closer to Lynn, his small hand finding hers. "A year," Eleanor repeated softly, gaze finding Jordan, then Pat and Lynn. "More than I deserve, more than I dared hope when I thought I was dying on that table." "There are experimental treatments," the doctor continued, pulling out charts. "Clinical trials that show promise." "No." Eleanor's refusal was gentle but firm, a decision already made. I've spent my life fighting wrong battles for wrong reasons. I want my remaining time spent differently, with my family. After the doctor departed with his medical charts and cautious optimism, silence hung heavy. Jordan climbed carefully onto Eleanor's bed, mindful of IV lines and monitor wires. "Are you scared, Grandma?" "A little," she answered honestly, respecting his intelligence, but not of dying, scared of wasting the time left, of not making things right. "You're already making things right. You say sorry when you make mistakes. You're trying to be better. That's what matters." Jordan's wisdom sometimes startled the adults around him. Eleanor's eyes filled. She looked at Pat and Lynn. "I have a request. Presumptuous perhaps, but I want to come home. Not to the main house. I know that's too much to ask. But the cottage, on the property, the old gardener's residence. I want to be close to Jordan, to be part of his life while I can." Pat tensed immediately, ready to refuse, but Lynn's hand on his arm stopped the words. "We'll discuss it," she said diplomatically. That evening, after Jordan was asleep, Pat and Lynn debated Eleanor's request in the kitchen over wine. The cottage sat empty at the property's far end, close enough for daily visits, but separate enough for boundaries. "She's manipulating us," Pat argued, pacing the kitchen, "using her illness to guilt." "She's dying, Pat. That's not manipulation, it's fact." Lynn's voice remained calm but firm. "A year if we're lucky. Less if we're not." A year is significant time, long enough to poison Jordan against us, to play mind games. Or long enough to be the grandmother she should have been. Lynn set down her wine glass. "I'm not saying trust blindly, but Jordan deserves the chance to know her, to have that relationship while it's possible. After everything she did to us, I haven't forgotten, but I'm not letting my pain rob Jordan of his grandmother either. We set boundaries, maintain vigilance, but give her this chance." Pat studied his wife, for that's how he thought of her now, despite the 8-year gap. "You're better than I am, more forgiving." "No, just someone who's learned anger is exhausting. I carried it 8 years, let it color everything. Don't want Jordan carrying it his whole life." The next morning they presented Eleanor with their decision and conditions. She could move to the cottage, Jordan could visit daily after school. But rules existed. No unsupervised visits initially, no gifts without approval, no discussing. The past without Pat or Lynn present. Eleanor agreed without argument, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "I'm grateful for any terms, any chance to know him properly." 2 days later, she was discharged with a portable heart monitor and bags of medication. Pat watched from the main house as orderlies helped his mother into the cottage, the same cottage where Lynn's mother had once worked as a cleaner. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "Full circle," Lynn murmured beside him, "your mother living in the servants' quarters." Karma has a sense of humor. That afternoon, Jordan practically vibrated with excitement as they walked to the cottage. Eleanor had managed to have a small piano moved in, with permission, and afternoon tea arranged in the garden, like a proper English grandmother. "I learned the new piece," Jordan announced, running ahead. "The Chopin nocturne you mentioned, all 4 pages." Pat hung back, watching his son embrace this woman who'd tried erasing his existence. The conflict was painful. Protective father warring with the part recognizing Eleanor's genuine desire to change. "He forgives so easily," he said to Lynn. "Children do. It's adults who complicate forgiveness with conditions and prerequisites. Those conditions exist for reasons, to protect. To protect, yes, but also to punish. There's a difference, Pat." As Jordan played beautifully, Pat noted with fatherly pride, Eleanor sat beside him on the bench, occasionally offering gentle guidance. The scene was achingly normal, touchingly grandmotherly, making Pat's chest tight with what could have been from the beginning. "She would have loved this from day one," Lynn said softly, reading his thoughts. if fear hadn't controlled her. Would she? Or is this just another game? Watch her face when she looks at him. That's not manipulation. That's love. Late blooming, hard won, but real. That night, as Jordan chatted through dinner about his grandmother teaching new fingering techniques and promising to show him videos of famous pianists, Pat found himself softening despite reservations. She asked about you, Jordan mentioned casually over dessert. About how you and Mama met. Said she wished she'd understood your love story better back then. Pat and Lynn exchanged glances. What did you tell her? That you met in a thunderstorm, fell in love over music and art, had to be apart, but found each other again because true love always wins, Jordan grinned, like in storybooks. If only it were that simple. But looking at his son's shining face, at Lynn's soft smile, at the family they were rebuilding piece by careful piece, Pat realized maybe it was. Eleanor might have only a year, might have less, but in that year, with boundaries and vigilance, and careful navigation of old wounds, perhaps they could all find something like redemption. The cottage lights glowed softly in the distance as Pat tucked Jordan into bed. Tomorrow would bring another visit, another careful step toward whatever version of family they were becoming. Dad, Jordan's voice was sleepy. I'm glad Grandma's here, even if she made mistakes before. Everyone deserves second chances, right? Right, buddy. Pat kissed his forehead. Everyone deserves second chances. As he turned off the light, Pat realized he was beginning to believe it himself. Eleanor's storm had raged for years, destroying and dividing. But sometimes storms cleared air, washed away old sins, left room for new growth. Time would tell if this fragile peace could hold. But for now, with his son safe and his wife beside him, and even his mother trying to make amends, Pat allowed himself something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Real, tangible hope for the future they were building together. Chapter 10. Where We Belong. 6 months after Eleanor's surgery, October's sun hung low over the Atlantic, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of amber and rose. The hidden Montauk beach, where Pat and Lynn had first married, looked like a fairy tale. White chairs arranged on sand, an arch of roses facing the waves, silk ribbons dancing in the sea breeze. Pat stood at the altar in cream linen, heart full as he watched the small procession. Jordan walked first, carrying rings on a seashell pillow, his face serious with responsibility. He wore matching linen with a bow tie, like a real gentleman. Behind him came Lynn, stealing Pat's breath as she had 8 years ago. She wore a flowing, white sundress, simple, elegant, perfect. Wildflowers crowned her loose curls, and her feet were bare in the sand. She carried a bouquet Jordan had helped pick that morning. But it was her smile that undid him, radiant, unguarded, full of joy. The guests were few but precious. James, Pat's best friend who'd weathered every storm. Maria, more family than employee, dabbing her eyes. Lynn's mother, finally won over by Pat's devotion and Jordan's happiness. And Eleanor. His mother sat in the front row, shawl around thin shoulders, face peaceful despite her fragility. These 6 months had transformed her. She'd become the grandmother she should always have been, teaching Jordan piano, sharing stories, learning to braid Lynn's hair during quiet afternoons. The cancer had spread faster than expected. Doctors now spoke in weeks, not months, but she was here, present, family. The minister, the same from their first ceremony, smiled as Lynn reached the altar. We gather today to witness Patrick and Lynn Wilkinson renew their vows. 8 years ago, they promised forever in secret. Today, they proclaim that promise to the world. Pat took Lynn's hands, feeling the slight tremble matching his own. 8 years ago, I promised to love you forever. I failed to protect that promise, let others convince me it wasn't real. But it was real, is real. You are my heart, my home, my forever. I promise to love you fiercely, protect you faithfully, choose you daily for all our days. Lynn's eyes shimmered. 8 years ago, I promised to trust you with my heart. Fear made me run, but love brought me back. You are my best friend, my safe harbor, the father of my children, and love of my life. I promise to stand beside you, believe in us, build our family on truth and trust. The rings, please, the minister said. Jordan stepped forward proudly, offering the pillow. As Pat slipped the band onto Lynn's finger, a new ring joining the original she'd never removed, Jordan whispered loudly, "Don't drop it this time, Dad." Gentle laughter rippled through the guests as Pat remembered his abandoned wedding to Serena. "I won't, buddy. This time I know exactly what I'm doing. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you, once again and forever, husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Pat cupped Lynn's face, thumbs brushing away happy tears. The kiss was soft, sweet, full of promises kept and futures bright. The small gathering erupted in applause as Jordan jumped up and down, shouting, "They did it! They really did it!" As they turned to face their loved ones, Lynn's hand went unconsciously to her still flat belly. They'd planned to wait until after the ceremony to share their news, but Jordan, with his usual perception, caught the gesture. "Mama, are you okay?" Lynn looked at Pat, who nodded. "More than okay, baby. We have something to tell you. You're going to be a big brother." Jordan's eyes widened. Then he whooped with joy, throwing his arms around both parents. "Really? A baby? When? Can I teach them piano? Will they have eyes like Dad and me?" "We'll have to wait and see," Pat laughed, scooping his son up. "But they'll definitely have the best big brother ever." Eleanor rose shakily from her chair, James helping her forward. Her eyes were bright with tears as she reached them. "A baby," she whispered, touching Lynn's arm with reverent wonder. "A new beginning." "We were going to tell you privately," Lynn said. "We know you've been worried about leaving us." "I'm here now," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Here for this moment, this joy. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." The reception was intimate perfection. Dinner under string lights on the beach, Jordan playing piano pieces on the portable keyboard, stories shared and laughter flowing like champagne. As sunset painted everything in spectacular colors, Pat found Eleanor sitting alone, watching Jordan teach Lynn's mother a simple melody. "Thank you," she said quietly as he sat beside her. "For what?" "For letting me be here. For giving me these months with Jordan. For showing me what I almost destroyed." She took his hand, grip surprisingly strong. "I won't see this new baby born. We both know that. But I've seen Jordan happy. I've seen you and Lynn together as you were meant to be. I felt what real family is. That's more redemption than I deserved." Pat squeezed her hand. "You're part of this family, Mother, the good and bad, past and present. We forgive. We move forward. Together. Your father would be so proud of you, of Lynn, of the family you've built despite my interference." Eleanor smiled through tears. "Love better than I did, Patrick. That's all I ask." Later, as the party wound down and stars emerged in brilliant display, Pat and Lynn swayed together to music only they could hear. Jordan had fallen asleep in Maria's lap, exhausted from excitement. Eleanor dozed in her chair, peaceful smile on her face. "No more secrets," Lynn murmured against Pat's chest. "No more running, no more fear." "Just us," Pat agreed, hand settling over her belly where their second child grew. "Our family, our truth, our forever." The waves whispered against the shore, the same eternal rhythm that had witnessed their first vows and now blessed their renewal. 8 years of pain had led to this moment. This beach, this love, this family made stronger by the storms it had weathered. 2 weeks later, Eleanor passed peacefully in her sleep, holding Jordan's hand while he played her favorite nocturne. Her last words were both apology and blessing. "Love better than I did." A year later, on another October afternoon, Pat watched Jordan teaching his baby sister her first piano notes. Charlotte had her mother's beautiful brown eyes and her father's determined chin. She banged the keys enthusiastically while Jordan patiently guided her tiny fingers. Lynn appeared beside him, sliding her arm around his waist. "Eleanor would have loved this," she said softly. "She knew it would happen. Somehow, I think she held on just long enough to see us truly whole." Through the window, the cottage where Eleanor had spent her final months stood empty but not abandoned. They'd converted it into a music studio for Jordan, where Eleanor's piano would nurture future generations of Wilkinson musicians. "Daddy, look!" Charlotte called, managing a perfect C note. "I did it!" "Beautiful, sweetheart. Just like your mama," Lynn laughed. "Actually, that's all you. The music is definitely from your side. The beauty is all you," Pat countered, kissing her temple. As afternoon sun slanted through windows, painting everything golden, Pat Wilkinson counted his blessings. A wife he'd loved, lost, and found again. A son who'd brought them back together. A daughter who represented new beginnings, and the memory of a mother who'd found redemption in her final act of love. The storms had passed. The secrets were buried. The family was whole. They were home.